Coming up on ParaTruth Reborn, we'll be talking to Deborah Blake about her book, Everyday Witches, Book of Deities.
Welcome to ParaTruth.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to ParaTruth Reborn. My name is Eric, and today Justin is not joining us, but he is here with us in spirit. Tonight, we are stepping into the world of deities with our friend Deborah Blake. Deborah, welcome to ParaTruth Reborn.
Thank you so much.
Really happy to have you here. This has been like a conversation that Justin and I have had over the years, just the idea of deities and people working with deities. It's very intriguing for us, and I think a lot of our listeners. But for listeners who may be new to deity work, what does it actually mean to work with a god or goddess in modern witchcraft?
Well, I mean, first of all, for people who are not familiar with modern witchcraft, which not everybody is, it is essentially a nature-based spiritual path or religion. And one of the things that differentiates it from many of the other religions, not all of them, but many, is that in general, it is polytheistic, which means that we worship more than one deity. Now, that's not always true. Some people may worship a god alone. Some people may worship a goddess, which is the other thing that makes it different from sort of the religions that many of us grew up with. There was no goddess. She's like in the closet, locked up, with a key thrown away. So many of the people who have been drawn to witchcraft are drawn to it because of this idea that you could worship God and goddess. You could worship goddess alone. There are a lot of options from a lot of different cultures. A lot of different cultures. But basically, the idea is that you can pick a deity, or sometimes the deity picks you, that suits who you are. You aren't assigned one, as it were. I grew up Jewish. I mean, I'm still Jewish. If you're born Jewish, you're Jewish. Just ask Hitler. But we got this patriarchal father figure God, and that was your choice. That was the one option, little box. That was it. And while there are a lot of things that I love about Judaism, and I am very proud of my heritage, that one little box did not work for me. So if your little one box doesn't work for you, the great thing about witchcraft and deities is you get to look for a different box, so to speak.
Right. But now, one thing that I've kind of come across is that people tend to, especially when it comes to witchcraft, people tend to work with various spirits, and most of them are, ancestral spirits. Some of them are angelic, but when it comes to deities, they become a little weary of it, or even a little like concerned on whether or not they can handle it. But your book is often described as being inclusive and beginner friendly. So why was it important to make deity work feel accessible instead of intimidating for those people who maybe are just starting?
Well, first of all, I was once a person who was just starting, and so yes, I'm old, but I remember what that felt like. But part of it was in response to a lot, because I'm a relatively well-known author, I get a lot of messages and emails and things, and I actually answer every single one. But one of the things that came up fairly often was people saying, how can I be sure I'm doing it right? How can I be sure that I'm not making a mistake and, pissing off a deity? How do I know, what offerings to make? How do I know which deity to do? And so this book basically was an answer to all those questions because I got tired of answering them over and over. but but also because my whole thing as an author, and this is my 19th book on witchcraft, modern witchcraft, if you can believe it, is that idea of accessibility. I want it to be easy and stress-free for people. This is not supposed to be, you know, a slog. This is not, there's no test, there's no quiz, you can't flunk unless you, I don't know, do something really horrible. But most witches don't. Most witches are just like regular people trying to do their best in life. And so I wanted to make it really clear to people that there was no wrong way. And sorry, cat, cat helping. Yeah. Bast is a great deity for people who have cats. She's Egyptian and she's falling down on the job right now. But one of the things about witchcraft is that it's a journey. You don't start at the beginning knowing everything you're going to know. I certainly didn't. I wandered down this path. It wasn't quite the right path. I wandered down that path. So what I try and do is make it just a little bit easier for people to figure out what their path is and then walk it.
Yeah. I feel the same way, personally being a Christian. It's like when you first getting into the church and you're learning about God, you're reading the Bible, it's like you're told certain things or how to uh, understand biblical prophecy and text. But then once you start researching it yourself, you start thinking, oh, well, this seems different from what I've been taught, or this feels like this, doesn't quite answer this question. And you just kind of dive in and become, grow with the history of it and understanding of it. But that shifts maybe some of my personal perspectives from those that are maybe in the church in many cases.
And in some of that is that you have to trust your own instincts.
Mhm.
If you read something, whether it's about Christianity or about witchcraft, and your gut says, no, I don't think so. Well, then listen to your gut, especially if your gut is telling you that it might be harmful to you, harmful to others. I mean, just despite all of the rumors otherwise, witchcraft is very benign. And there are like a few evil witches, just like there are a few evil everybody's. Not all Christians walk their talk either. Sadly, lots of them don't. Most witches do. Some of them get a little carried away with the whole idea of it. But the witches that I know are all really lovely people. They look just like your next door neighbor. Some of them probably are next door. I'm just saying. But we're all just human beings trying our best to make our way in this world, and having a deity or deities to call on when things get difficult, to believe in when life is challenging. As a Christian, you know that this is important. It's, it is in a difficult world. It is nice to have something bigger than yourself, even if that thing that is bigger than you doesn't give you easy answers.
Right.
Which, frankly, if you're really paying attention, it's more likely to give you challenges. But that's okay too.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like going back to there just being individuals who are bad individuals. It's like, unfortunately, those people tend to quote unquote speak louder than those that
Yeah.
are good, right? And so you get this kind of Hollywood aspect of witchcraft, for example, or whatever it is, and whatever the faith, you have these people who just like Christianity has a bad rap in many occasions because of people who just don't do it well.
Right. And
People.
I have to say, a number of my friends are Christians and they are lovely human beings, and our differences in beliefs don't get in our way. We are very accepting of each other. And the people who cannot accept that somebody believes something that's different than what they believe, that's their problem.
Right.
Yeah, that's a you problem. That is the problem. I think that everybody's entitled to their opinion. They're just not entitled to force it on somebody else.
Right. 100%. So when it comes to um, the deities, when it comes to working with deities, how do you know when one is maybe trying to reach out to you personally? Because obviously you can reach out to them, but every once in a while, maybe one reaches out to you. How do you know that's happening?
Well, I mean, that can happen in various different ways. I know I have a friend who a deity came to her in a dream, and she could tell from the dream that it was not a regular dream. It was one of those, if you've ever had a dream that is super intense and obviously meaningful in some way, she had a dream like that. I had one actually come to me recently. I was asking for help over a particular issue that I'm dealing with. I was having a hypnotherapy session, and the deity showed up in the hypnotherapy session because you're relaxed and open, you know. So that, the same with dreaming, relaxed and open. So that is one way if you are open to getting messages and paying attention if a deity decides to choose you or decides that, you need them at this particular juncture in your life. That's the best way. There are also signs. Um, you know, Numerous deities have various, creatures or other things that are associated with them, for instance, Hecate, crows and ravens. Um, so if you start seeing something over and over again, say you start seeing crows a lot, then maybe you want to look at, well, which deities are associated with crows? There are a few. Um, if it's ravens, it might be Odin because Odin was really associated with. So, you want to again be paying attention because you know the gods aren't subtle.
Right.
Deities tend to, they don't necessarily set a bush on fire. Hopefully not during like fire season, but usually if they are reaching out to you, they will let you know, and you just have to be paying attention and be open-minded.
Well, now your book covers Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Celtic, and Norse pantheons. How did you decide on which pantheons to include, and was there a reason why you didn't include, certain ones that maybe aren't in the book?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
So Um, one of the things that happens when you are an author is you do not make decisions alone. I have an editor at Llewellyn, and we talked about this in the beginning because I had thought about including some wider, it's so difficult because you want to be inclusive, but you don't want to step on people's toes. And it's a really funny balance. Well, not funny, but it's a tricky balance. And so she and I talked about what was the best approach. And what she thought, Alicia Gallo, my fabulous editor, was that the best thing to do would be to take the pantheons that you mentioned, which modern witchcraft has been using since the beginning of modern witchcraft. Those are the most commonly used, and they have been in such common usage that they're sort of readily accepted as part of a witchcraft practice. And I am not an expert on some other things, like for instance, the African deities, who are actually they're not exactly deities. There's land spirits, sea spirits. There are people who come from that culture who are writing wonderful books about that culture. And if people are interested in interacting with those deities, they can get their information from people who know much more than I do and who are much more qualified to talk about it than I am. So I basically stuck with these major pantheons that we've been using for years and a few sort of miscellaneous, really, really ancient deities because I didn't feel like I was qualified to talk about, say, Native American deities or African deities or whatever. What I did include, and this was something that I really, really wanted to do with this book, was some of these deities, especially in the Greek pantheon and some in the Egyptian pantheon, the Celtic pantheon, um, can be perceived as either male deities or female deities, or sometimes both, or sometimes neither. And that's something that really wasn't addressed in most of the other books. I have a lot of research books. I have a lot of books because I've been doing this for a long time. And people really didn't talk about that. And that was a place where I wanted to be inclusive. Witchcraft attracts a lot of people who are other, whatever that other is, who don't fit into neat little slots in our society. Witches mostly don't fit into neat little slots. But that's why we called it the Everyday Witches Book of Deities instead of Gods and Goddesses, because I wanted it to be something where if somebody was by, they could read this book and find a deity that perhaps they felt like they could connect to because that was addressed in the book.
Yeah, for sure. Now, for someone who maybe feels drawn to multiple pantheons, is it okay to work across traditions, or how should they?
Absolutely.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, no, I consider myself to be what's called an eclectic witch,
Mhm.
which means you pull from all sorts of places. And I do, even in a ritual. I have a coven that I've been leading since 2004, if you could believe it. It's covens don't usually hang out together that long, and people have come and people have gone, but our core group is still together. And even on, say, the spring equinox, we might invoke a deity from, a goddess from one pantheon and a god from another pantheon, because I just choose who like feels appropriate for the ritual that I'm doing. So, yeah, that is absolutely fine. Some people find one pantheon that they're comfortable with and stick with it, and that is also fine. One of the things that I included in the book, which is actually my favorite part of the book, is the parts I didn't write, um, which seems a little strange, but it's the part that interests me the most because I know the inside of my brain. Um, I happen to have some friends who followed particular pantheons. I have a friend who is follows Norse deities exclusively. They actually consider themselves to be a heathen witch as opposed to just a witch. And I have another friend who is a druid and he follows the Celtic ones. He's a druid witch. Um, so I asked these friends if they would write a sort of a brief essay on what their practice looked like, because it's very different from what my practice looked like. And having known these folks for a while, I've always found their approach to be fascinating, and I thought I would share that with my readers. And people seem to appreciate that. So yes, you can either do one pantheon, multiple pantheons, one deity, multiple deities. There are no real rules, which is probably why I like this.
Well, now that brings another question to mind, though. So, you or anyone who wants to work with multiple deities, and say you do that, and that's fine. But is there ever a chance or or a time in which the deities themselves don't want to work together? And they're like, oh, well,
I've never had that happen. I
okay,
suppose it's possible. Um, but it, I sort of envision them all hanging out in sort of a big clubhouse in the sky. I don't know. Here's the tricky thing about deities, and it's it's complicated, hard to explain, hard to understand, and yet if you think about it, it sort of makes sense. Which is that there's more than one way to look at deity.
Mhm.
There is the all-encompassing power that is so much greater than we are that we really can't comprehend it as puny little human beings. Deity as a whole is it's like trying to comprehend the universe.
Mm.
You just really can't. And so each culture has come up with ways to connect with deity. And so we have deities that have names and things that are associated with them. Like there's Thor, who's associated with thunder. He also is very protective of mankind. Um, and he is part of this whole big thing. And you can look at him or any of the other deities as individuals, but they are also at the exact same time this big, huge thing. And I think that while each individual deity is very real and very connectable with, they are also way more immense than, our stories about the gods, are written by humans and they're therefore smaller than the deities themselves. Especially if you're in the Marvel universe. Uh, but you know, I think that if you think about deity at the same time as individual beings, but also this fragment of a big, huge thing, I think they come to us in ways that we can connect with them, that we can understand, that we can communicate with, that we can get comfort from. But I think mythology aside, they don't fight with each other. They are bigger than that. And that's just my opinion. I mean, there are people who have different views. They're allowed to. Not everybody agrees with me. I know that's shocking.
Well, now, one thing that obviously is very, I would say important, but it's something that kind of stands out in nearly any belief system is the idea of having a place to worship, to conjure, to do your spells. And so in this case, we're talking about altars. So how important is it to have an altar when you're working with deities? And does it really have to be as extravagant as we're seeing on social media? Because I
Oh,
think a lot of
heck
people,
no. No. I mean, my group when we practice outside because I'm in upstate New York and like most seasons of the years it's either snowing, pouring, mosquitoing or something. But when we're outside, we actually have a stone circle, and there's a big flat stone that is the altar. It's a stone, and no babies have been sacrificed down. I saw a frog on it once. That was as close as we got. And he hopped up. He was fun. But we'll set up a few things that we feel are appropriate, like some flowers as an offering or things that relate to the season. If it's one of the harvest festivals, we may put fresh corn or whatever. An altar can be as complicated or as simple as you want. I have an altar that's set up in my living room that usually I change out for the seasons. And it'll have, really simple deity statues sometimes. I mean, they're just clay blobs, one of which has like horns. Um, which are made out of sticks. Really fancy. Um, and then you can put, candles if you want to put candles, or stones if you want to put stones. If you are dealing with a particular deity and you want to make a deeper connection, you could put offerings to that deity. And that's one of the things that I did in this book. I did all the research on which are the appropriate offerings so you don't have to.
that was my next
Because-
question.
Yeah, that is one of those things that whenever I would start working with a new deity, I would have to go looking to find out, well, okay, what does this deity like to have on their altar? And I tell you that, you're welcome. I with this deity that came to me recently through this hypnotherapy session, I was told specifically, you need to change your altar. You need to make an altar to me. Uh, and so I took 90% of what I normally have on my altar off, and I've been slowly adding things that seemed appropriate to that deity, but it's not a ton of stuff. You For one thing, you do not have to spend a zillion dollars. People have to buy gas and food, and the gods understand that. Right now, that's like 99% of all the money we have is gas and food. So you can use things from nature. It's a nature based religion. If you want to bring in a stone, if you're worshiping a deity that is a water deity, bring a shell, put a bowl of water. It can be as simple as a bowl of water. And you don't have to worry too much about getting it right. Do it from the heart. You know, all fresh flowers are always a good offering. Most deities like that. Some form of food, and, if you have a cat that's going to leap up on your altar, if you put fresh food, well, you could put something dried. Herbs are always good. Stones are good. I happen to be a crystal junkie. I have a lot of crystals. And so I usually have various crystals that feel appropriate for the deity, but it does not have to be complicated.
Okay.
Usually on a full moon, I walk outside, stand underneath the moon, and say hi. That's as complicated as that gets.
Okay.
So it's all what feels right to you
Mm.
and what works with your life. Some people are not, as we call it, out of the broom closet. If you are sharing your space with somebody who is either not comfortable with your witchcraft or doesn't know you're a witch, you can take some really simple things like take a shell to represent water and a rock to represent earth and a candle to represent fire and a stick of incense to represent air and put them all together. And they don't necessarily have to look like an altar. So it really is very personal and very individual. And this is something that people who read my books probably get really tired of me saying. There is no wrong way. There is no one right way. As long as you are not hurting yourself or anybody else, it's fine.
All right. Well, now, like, I mean, obviously you did the research and you share all that in your book of what deities tend to like for offerings. But how does one discern, or how have you discerned when a deity doesn't like something, even if they just don't like? I know you had one example where, deity came forward and said, "You need to make an altar to me." But not everyone gets that kind of message. So how do you discern when something maybe isn't the right option?
Well, um, for one thing, again, you have to listen to your heart. You have to listen to your gut. And, I believe that is true across all religions, all spiritual paths, that you need to be paying attention to that little inner voice that gets lost in this world that we live in. We all have our phones all the time and we're watching TV and, there's just so much going on. We have jobs, we have, you know, people depending on us, and it can be hard to find that space. If you feel like your magical work isn't working and you're not sure why, you can stand in front of your altar and sort of look at things and just sort of feel like, does this feel right? Does this not feel right? Everybody has those answers inside them. You don't have to have, 30 years of experience as a witch. All you have to do is listen. Again, I mostly haven't found that there's an issue with that, but if you feel like something is wrong, probably something's wrong.
All right. I think for right now, that is a good place to stop. We're going to do a mid break here to hear from our sponsors, and we will be right back. A quick thank you to our supporting sponsor, Nodakian Studios. Looking for something truly one of a kind? Nodakian Studios creates high-fired ceramics that are dishwasher, microwave, and food safe. Every mug, bowl, vase, bottle, and planter is wheel-thrown and hand-decorated, making each piece unique. They also offer pottery classes for all skill levels. Whether you're touching clay for the first time or looking to expand your artistic skills, Nodakian Studios, where craftsmanship and creativity come together. Find out more at nodakianstudios.com.
I love handmade pottery, by the
Yeah.
way. Absolutely. Yeah, I spent 23 years running an artist cooperative shop featuring 50 local artists. There were a number of potters, and I own a ridiculous amount of pottery because handmade pottery is the best thing in the world. It feels completely different.
Yo, for sure. I have got a couple pieces from Nodakian, and it's one of those that I use at least 2 or 3 times a week for coffee. That's just
All my favorite mugs are handmade mugs. I actually have, a few little things on my altar that are handmade pottery.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of handmade anything, but yes, pottery is definitely one of my weaknesses.
So now, when it comes to uh, deities, obviously we're talking about deities, but when it comes to uh, communicating with the deity and wanting to, you know, I guess, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the question. How do you know when you're having a spiritual connection with the deity and certain spells are coming true versus you're just seeing what you want to see and it's all made up in your mind?
You know, there's no easy answer to that
Okay.
because it all comes down to faith, and faith is difficult.
Mhm.
Faith is, I mean, I struggle with faith just the same way everybody else does when things are going horribly wrong and maybe you're doing spells and nothing is happening or you're not getting the results you hoped for. One of the things that I remind people is that you can ask the deities for anything you want. Sometimes the answer is no, you know, and that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's sort of like my best analogy is if you're a little kid and you say to your parents, okay, I want to have ice cream before dinner. And they say, no, you need to eat your dinner first. Sometimes when you're doing spells and you're asking deity for something, they don't give it to you because it's either not the right time, it's not the right answer for you. You may think it is the right answer for you, but they know better because, well, deity. Um, it's not necessarily it doesn't mean they're not listening, and it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just may mean that whatever it is you're hoping to get wouldn't do you any favors. And I have had a few times when I have had my wishes granted as part of a lesson because in fact I was asking for the wrong things, and if I persisted in asking for them the gods would just go, all right, if you insist, but let's see what you're going to learn from this. And sometimes those are pretty tough lessons.
Yeah.
So how do you tell the difference between whether you're getting something granted or whether it's just happening? Sometimes it's really obvious. Sometimes it's just like, whoa. I mean, it's hardly ever a winning lottery ticket, sadly. If that worked, we'd have a lot more, wealthy witches at Big Deal. But sometimes it's really obvious. Like, say you do a prosperity spell and you're thinking, oh, my car is dying. I need to get money. But instead of getting money, somebody says, I need a new car. I'm going to get rid of my old one pretty cheap. Do you want it? that is an answer. That's a yes. It's just not the yes you thought you were going to get. You thought you were going to get the lottery ticket that let you buy a new car. No, you got an opportunity. You got this gift. So sometimes you have to be open-minded enough to be aware if the answer you are looking for is not exactly coming to you in the form you expected. And sometimes you're just asking the wrong question.
Mm. I think, it's like humanity has a very finite understanding of what they're interested in, what they want, and how they want to receive it. And, my own personal experience as well. It's like you keep or you end up like getting an answer to something and it creates a ripple effect. And those ripples aren't always good ripples. They ripple into something undesirable, ultimately. And it's like you keep asking and asking and asking. Finally, you're offered it, you're given it, and it's like, wait a minute, this isn't quite what I thought it would be, And like, it's it's definitely one of those things where, like, for me, coming from a spiritual background and a Christian background, it's like there are moments where I ask for things that don't that I don't get them the way that I expect them. And there are
Right.
opportunities I've missed. And I think back like, well, was that really something I should regret? Or is that something I should be thankful for? Missing that, it's like,
And the thing is, we don't know.
yeah,
We don't have all the answers. We're never going to have all the answers because we're just human and life is confusing and messy and you know, anybody who tells you they have all the answers is either delusional or lying or both. Most of us are wandering around in circles pretty confused most of the time. People think, oh, you're a witch, you're a high priestess, you've written all these books, you must be so wise and know all the answers. And I'm like, no, all that's taught me is how much I don't know.
right.
That's the wiser you get, the more you realize you know this much. Seriously, as much. And then you just sort of make your peace with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've written 19 books. That's a
Yeah.
lot of books.
19 nonfiction books. I've also written a whole bunch of fiction.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I'm a busy woman, a busy woman.
That's good. That's very good. Um, but you've written 19 books on modern witchcraft. How has your own practice changed over the years as you've written those books and done your research?
A lot. And that is one of the things that I address in this book is that your connections with deities is going to change over, if you continue to practice witchcraft, as you change and grow, you're going to have different connections. You may be, worshiping one deity for 10 years and then things shift and change in your life and you need to look elsewhere and they're okay. They don't get I've never known one to go, but you promised. No, they're like, oh good. Yeah, you're annoying me. Go, go, bother Hecate for a while. But witchcraft practice is very much a practice of growth and change if you're doing it more or less right. Because as human beings, we are not static. It is, for me, witchcraft is all about trying to become the best person you can be, the best witch you can be, the best human being you can be. And that is an ongoing process. You make mistakes, you make course corrections, you figure out that, this seemed like the right path for you. And then you went, oh, well, no, I don't like that anymore. And as you change, your deity worship is going to change. One of the things that personally has happened with me, and again, this may not apply to anybody else but me, is that my practice has become much simpler. It's, I used to, when I first started out, I did all the bells and whistles. When I did a ritual, there was, you know, all sorts of things that were involved. I'd call the quarters and, do all of this, I'd have 10 different supplies and all of these kind of things. And I'm tired and I'm busy and life is complicated. And I am much more likely to just light a candle at my altar and talk. Just say, okay, you can see what's going on. This is, I'm asking for help with this. And here's a flower. Thank you. Um, so I do think that one of the things that I have seen newbie witches tend to do all the bells and whistles. And that's not a bad thing because those bells and whistles, all the herbs and the stones and all the rest of it help us to focus on our goals. That's what they're basically there for. They're symbols that remind us of what we're working on. And when you first start out, you really need those because most of us don't focus all that well. And so it's like, okay, this stone is for prosperity and this herb is for prosperity. And so you keep saying prosperity and it gets in your brain and it goes out into the universe and it's all good.
It's foundation.
Right. There is a reason. Also, it's fun and it's pretty. As you go further along in your practice, it's not that you don't use those things. You tend to, in general, and again, I'm mostly talking about myself because everybody's different. I pull that stuff out for the big important things. If there is something, if I'm in crisis or if I really need help, or if I'm practicing with my friends and we're doing something for a holiday, we may or may not, um, do all the things. But for, the everyday stuff, my practice looks like me waking up in the morning and greeting the day and saying hello to the gods, and asking them to help me through my day. And at the end of the day, saying thank you, practicing gratitude and saying, okay, these were the things that went right. These are the things that went wrong, but thanks for giving me the strength and energy to cope with it and, not bury any bodies in my backyard. Very much appreciated. And in between that, there may be moments where I light a candle or, put out an offering. I have sort of a strange thing going on right now. I have a big garden, and in my garden, there is a garden pond that was built by this great stonemason. And there's at the top of the pond, there's sort of a little waterfall, and it's built of stone. And I have garter snakes, which are perfectly harmless, and they like the stone and they go in there. And this year, I have the big mama of all garter snakes. I have never in my life seen a garter snake this big. She's probably this big around and this long. For a garter snake, that's like huge.
Right.
And I sort of get this sense that maybe she's more than just a snake. I don't know. But I go out there and I always look for her. And if I see her, I greet her politely just in case. And I say, good morning. And I mean, I don't really have treats to give her. I'm not sure what you'd give. I mean, they eat earthworms. I could go dig up an earthworm. I have frogs in the pond, and I'm pretty sure she occasionally helps herself to one of those. I try not to,
Think about
I
it.
love my frogs. But it's one of those things where, again, this is part of my spiritual practice. I'm looking for things in the environment that are different and unusual. Maybe she's just a snake. Maybe she's symbolic of something. Snakes are symbols of health and regeneration and renewal because of the way they shed their skins. And in fact, I was looking for something to put on my new altar, and one of the smaller snakes shed its entire skin. You don't usually find the whole thing. You could see where the eyes were all the way to its tail.
Crazy.
And it's sitting on my altar now because I'm working on healing, and it seemed appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people get this misconception that when it comes to talking with deities, you have to make it very elaborate. You have to go into deep prayer. Even with the Christian faith, a lot of people think, oh, you got to be on your knees, you got to be praying, you got to be in quiet place. And it's like sometimes it's just sitting in silence and meditating, just sitting with God, and being there
I think that is, in fact, the most important thing people miss. That idea that, yes, all you need to do is be present and open and quiet. Hard to do. I mean, that's not, it sounds simple. It's not simple. But that is the best way to connect with deity. And sometimes you feel them, sometimes you don't feel them. That doesn't mean they're not there.
Well, now speaking of misconceptions, are there any particular misconceptions when it comes to deity work?
Well, I mean, there's some of the obvious stuff from, all the bad movies and all the bad TV shows. There are no blood sacrifices. I promise you, all the years I've been doing this, I have never seen a blood sacrifice. Occasionally, somebody may spill some pomegranate juice, which looks sort of like a blood sacrifice, but that's as close as we get. Um, and there's also, I think, this misconception that, again, it's part of the misconception about witchcraft that you're selling your soul somehow. No, no, that's a Christian concept. Witches don't actually believe in the devil. That's not our thing. That's somebody else's thing, and you can have it. No, thank you. But I think the biggest misconception is that they're judging us sternly. And this, I think, comes in part from this whole Judeo Christian stern father figure. If you do it wrong, they will smote you. You know, I've never met anybody who's been smoted. Have you met anybody who's been smoted? I mean, I met people who stub their toes a lot. Maybe they need better shoes. But I think the gods are kind. I think the gods, now that doesn't mean they're going to let you get away with bull crap, that they're going to forgive you for being unkind to other people. You know, I think that if you are putting negativity out into the world and you ask the deities to do nice things for you, they're going to judge you on that. But they aren't going to judge you like you're a horrible human being.
Right.
They're again, it's sort of like a parent. If you pull your sister's hair or break a vase or lie or whatever it is, they don't stop loving you. They may not give you your treat, but they don't stop loving you. And I do believe that the gods are love. And at its essence, this is where people have gone so astray with Christianity. Christianity is all about love. Jesus is all about love. And anybody who doesn't understand that doesn't understand Christianity. And I'm a Jewish witch and I get that. So
Right. 100%. You're right. It's this idea of punishment that I think sticks to people because it's in a sense fear mongering. And not just amongst a Christian faith, but amongst
anybody.
systems and any person. But there is this idea of discipline, and it, like you said, the mother father figure. There's also the idea of karma and what you put out, you get back. And yeah,
Absolutely.
if you're out there being a complete jerk and expect goodness in return, chances are that's not happening. So definitely agree with you. Like there is discipline in the spiritual realm when it comes to working with spirits and deities and gods or God, but it's never as horrible as what people come up with. It's not like, oh, yes, we're not talking about Old Testament punishments here.
Right.
They're not going to open
Well,
up and swallow you
and
whole.
I've known people who've had bad things happen to them and they think I must have done something wrong. The deities are punishing me. And it's just life. Bad things happen in life, unfortunately. And it's very sad that it doesn't matter how good a human being you are and how much you do for others. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. And that doesn't mean that you have offended a deity.
Right.
It just means that you are a human being living a life. And if you look at the world right now, there are bad things happening all over the place. And you cannot tell me that everybody who had a building fall on them in a earthquake was a horrible human being that the gods did not approve of.
Right.
No, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and the earth shook.
Right.
And that's all there is to it.
I've heard it so many times. I'm an offender of this where, I say, why would God do this? Why do you do this to me? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And it's like, in wisdom, you learn like, well, that's not God. That's, just life. The earth has its things,
Yep.
earthquakes, tsunamis, fires, just tragedy, bad people.
Well, and illness and, all of that kind of stuff. It's unfortunately part of being a human being.
Right.
And being a human being's hard. It's just, it's just tough. And a lot of bad things do happen. But that doesn't mean that you've offended a deity. It just means that you're a human being living real life. And in real life, lots of bad things happen. I think the important thing is to be paying attention to the good things. The gods do send you good things. Sometimes they're little. Sometimes it's a bird singing outside your window on a really bad day. I've been dealing with chronic illness for 40 some years. And one of the things that it taught me is that you need to pay attention to the little gifts. Whether it's a cat that sits on your lap and purrs when you're feeling bad, or a particularly yummy meal, somebody gives you ice cream. Ice cream's good. Um, I think that one of the things that deities want us to do is pay attention to the good stuff and not just the bad stuff. As human beings, we have this tendency to sort of focus on, the obvious, I didn't get what I wanted,
Right.
or something horrible happened to me or happened to somebody that I loved. But then you have to look outside and see the sunset and it's beautiful. Or maybe the bad thing turned out to be not quite as bad as you thought it was going to be.
Right.
Maybe more expensive, but not quite as bad. So, yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately the deities aren't there to make our lives easy.
Right.
They're there to guide us if we're willing to let them. They're there to be comfort in the difficult times. And sometimes they do give us gifts. Sometimes, if we are asking for the right thing in the right way or doing our part of it, they will do it. And one of the things that I always say when people do spell work is you can't just do a spell and then sit down and wait for things to happen. Say you do a spell to ask for the perfect job. Well, then you have to go out and look for a job. You can't just, the goddess helps those who help themselves. So, some of it is still down to you and how you act. In fact, most of it's down to that.
Right. Now, we are getting kind of close to the end of the show here, but I do want to ask you this question because before we started recording, we were chatting a little bit about our cats. And witchcraft, for whatever reason, historically speaking, at least, cats tend to be associated to witchcraft.
Well,
And
they're
so
mysterious beings.
they are quite mysterious. Yes, I agree with you there. Um, so my question though is, what do your cats think of your magical work? And do you view them as familiars, supervisors, chaos agents, or maybe all the
Yes.
above?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I've had a lot of cats over my life. I am a official crazy cat lady. I have 5 now. I've had 5 most of the time. That seems to be my number. I don't know why. I always think 3 would be nice and reasonable, and then 5 happens. But I had one cat in particular who I named Magic. You have to be really careful with your name cats, who was in fact my familiar. And she was infamous for when my group would meet in my living room around our little round altar table. She would come in when we started, walk in a circle, greet everyone, sit either under the table or on the couch behind us. And we'd be like, okay, I guess we're starting the ritual now. And when it was time to be done, she would get up, walk around the table, and walk out of the room. Yeah, I mean, she truly was magic. Most of my cats are not familiars. Um, I have one or two who, if I'm doing magical work inside at my altar, they might come and meow at my feet. That usually means they're sensing the energy. Maybe they're helping, maybe they're not. The chaos agents, definitely. I have to be really careful of one cat in particular that I don't. I have an altar that's like up here for a reason. Because, yeah, I cannot just leave things out. I do think, well, witches can have familiars who are any kind of animal, birds, dogs, it doesn't matter. I think because of the cat's nature, there is something about them that transcends what we can understand.
Mhm.
They see things we don't see, and they are kind of bossy sometimes.
True.
Mine are definitely the boss of me. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been associated with witches for so many years is that they are the essence of mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why did they knock that thing off? I don't know. It's mystery.
No, I agree, and I see that a lot with my cat Binks. He tends to, they do the whole look in the corner type thing, but he will like look up the stairs and his tail will fluff up, or he'll hear something in the back bedroom and his tail, and looks over there. It's like it's clear that he's seeing something I can't see. And it's like my whole life, it's always been like, there's nothing there, dude, there's nothing there.
Yep.
But since having the cats myself, it's like,
You're like, yeah, there's something there. I just don't know what it is.
yeah, so whatever it is, just get it out of here, bud. Get it out of here.
Right. Yeah. And if it's an icky spirit, could you just escort it off the premises?
Right. Right. And I do see that, my cat Binks, he's black. He's a black cat. And so I see him as a protector, as type of a protector spirit in this house. I've noticed that when he heard his brother Salem when he was alive, this house that I live in, I grew up in.
Are you sure you're not a witch? You had a
Sure.
cat named Salem? Are you
Yeah,
sure you're not a
Salem,
witch?
I'm pretty sure. But my mom grew up here. I grew up here. The house has been haunted for roughly 60 years. And it wasn't always a healthy haunting. But since having them come in to the house, I've noticed a lot of things clear up and the energy shifts significantly. Having
They
the cats around.
Yeah, they do have very impressive energy. And, I think they've done research that shows that, when they purr, it actually affects the human body.
Yeah.
They have this connection to human beings that we don't really know where it came from, except that we know they came in from the wild on purpose because they decided we were a good source of food, cozy blankies, and everything else. They chose us. We didn't choose them. And in fact, cats are, genetically speaking, very close to their wild ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
They've just decided that they will tolerate us as long as we do the appropriate things, like feed them, exactly at 4 o'clock or else.
Right.
But yeah, I think that they do have this connection with the spirit world that we can't really explain. And some cats more than others, just like some people more than others.
Mhm.
But yeah, they're pretty cool. And I have 3 of my 5 are black.
Okay.
Two short-haired and one big fluffy long-haired. Yeah. And yeah,
Awesome.
they're 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 definitely more magic than I am.
Well, now we are here at the end of the show. So before I let you go, I want you to give you the opportunity to tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find your work. I'm going to hand the mic over to you. It's all yours.
Okay. Well, I'm everywhere. The best place to find me is if you go to my website, which is deborahblakeauthor.com. Very imaginative. Yes. And that's Deborah the long biblical way. deborahblakeauthor.com. And there are links to all the other places where I am, like, Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, although I still don't really understand TikTok. And also I have a Patreon and an Etsy where you can get signed books, that kind of thing. But yeah, if you go to my website, you can also see all the books. I have a page for every single book. So if you're like, well, what is this book really about? And there's links and all that kind of thing. Um, and if you have questions, because sometimes people have questions after these things, you can, go to my website and contact me through that. You can, track me down on Instagram, Deborah Blake author, and send me a message. And, if it's a legitimate question and not some silly nonsense, I will answer it.
Awesome. Well, Deborah, thank you so much for joining me on ParaTruth. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm gonna let you go here for a moment while I close out. But it's been a great conversation. I appreciate you. All right, everybody. That was Deborah Blake, author of Everyday Witches Book of Deities. So until next time, where you'll find us, same channel, same time. My name is Eric. Peace.